This is Gemara Zevachim Daf Kof Dalid, and we're holding in the bottom of Kof Gimel Amid Beis at the Mishnah, 6 lines into the wide lines. And as we embark on the post-Chanukah season, deep into the winter, the month of Teves, as we generously sponsored by a close friend of the Daf, as a schos aliyas neshama for a heilige yid, a yid that lived in Radin, learned by Rav Naftali Trop or by Yalib and Rav Yaakov. B'siyata d'shemaya, the incredible koyach ha'tayra, the schosim of Talmud Torah b'rabim, should elevate the neshama of Aryeh ben Yaakov higher and higher in Gan Eden Shel Mailam. We pick it up from the Mishnah about 6 lines into the wide lines on Kof Gimel and Beis, as we continue discussing the oyrais, the hides, and what schos the Kohanim have in particular to the hide of an animal, of a carbon that is puzzle. Says the Mishnah, Kol HaKochim Shirabem Psol Koidem Lev Shaitan. Any carbon that a psol happened to it before it was skinned, ein irois on the kohanim. The irois, the skin, does not go to the kohanim. Rashi articulates, so what do you do with it? Ela nisrafim im ayran. It has to be burnt together with the animal, together with the puzzle, kachei kachim. But if the psol happens, says the Mishnah, liacharav shaitan, then indeed, I say in the kohanim, the skins do yes go to the kohanim. Amar Rav Chanina's kana kohanim, ya my loyre isi ar sheyoytze lebeis asrifa. Says Rav Chanina's kana kohanim, you just told me that if it became possible before the avshata, then the ar should go lebeis asrifa. Says Rav Chanina's kana kohanim, I never saw such a thing. I never saw the hide being pulled out. Amar Rav Akiva midvarav lamanu. You know, we learn from Chanina's kana kohanim she'amavshir as habachar v'nimsa treifa. Let's say after the avshata, after the skinning, we find the animal to be a treifa. She'yeoisai hakohanim ba'iroi. The kohanim are still allowed to benefit from the hide. The Chachamim Aimrim Ein Lai Re'inu Raya. Say the Chachamim, no, we have not seen this. That which of Chanina's kana kohanim said as a Raya Alayetze Lebeis Asreifa. So says the Gemara. Let's begin with a stira between our Mishnah and the previous Mishnah. Says the Gemara, Kol shelo yatsa lebeis asreifa. I hope that wasn't covering the mic. I apologize if that was covering the mic. I hope that makes it better. Says the Mishnah, Kol shelo zacha mizbeach b'besara. The previous Mishnah taught us, Lo zachu akanim ba'ira. If a carbon is not zeich onto the mizbeach, doesn't go up because it's possible or some other problem, then the kohanim do not get the hide. Ve'af al gav dashnei lar kodim zrika. You could have done the avshata. You skin the animal, and then there was a psol. What do we say? If it can't go onto the mizbeach, the kohanim do not get the or. So money. Whose opinion is the previous Mishnah? Rav Elazar Rav Shimon Damar, Ein Adam Meratza El Arba V'nei Atzmai. The dam is not meratza by itself, meaning if there is a psol in the ar, it can't go on the mizbeach, and therefore in the carbon, it can't go on the mizbeach, and therefore the ar does not go to the kahanim. Ema Seifa, says the Seifa, more particularly our Mishnah, 5 lines to the bottom, Kol HaKodshim Shira Ben Psol Kodim Avshata Never like Kahanim. And if there's a psol before the Avshata, it doesn't go to the Kahanim. Lach Avshata Never like Kahanim. Who does that go like? Now like Rav Elazar Rav Shimon. Asking the Rebbe Damar Adam Meratzel Ar B'nei Atzmai, that the Zrikas Adam is enough, and therefore Kol Zman. There was no pasos before the Zrik, before the Avshata. The R would yes go to the Kehanim. Reish of Elazar Rav Shimon and Seifa Rebbe. So frag the Gemara, 2 different Mishnayos back to back, in which, as often the Gemara coins Reisha and Seifa, Says the Gemara, one's going to be Rav Elazar Rav Shimon and one is Rebbe. Answers the Gemara, Amar Abaye with the Sefer Rebbe, Reisha Nami Rebbe. Says Abaye, Teretz number 1, everything is Shitas Rebbe. Umayda Rebbe in the previous Mishnah, Shein Avshe Koidem Zrika, that there's no Avshata, that the Avshata does not take place before the Zrika, and therefore the two are going to happen concurrently. That both Mishnayos cannot happen in opposing views because the Avshata happens afterwards. Therefore, if there's a paslus by the Zrika, that means there's going to be a paslus koidem Avshata, like our Mishnah says, before the skinning, and then it won't go up to the Mizbeach, and therefore, according to both Mishnayos, the Kayin will not get the Ar. Teretz of number 1 of Abaye, fitting both Mishnayos to Shitas Rebbe. Rava Amar, Rava says, Fakert. With the Reish Elazar Rav Shimon, Sefer Nami Rav Elazar Rav Shimon. And how do we teach up the Sefer? My Koidem Av. Hefshit, what does our Mishnah mean? That if it goes possible before the Avshata, my Achar Hefshit, Koidem Shenira Lehefshit, Achar Shenira Lehefshit. It doesn't mean the actual practical Avshata like the simple reading means. It means that before it is Roli for the Avshata, which of course is at the time of the Zrika of the Dam, and therefore both Mishnayos exist simultaneously. Says the Gemara, let's go and find the original source for these two Shitais, the Shita of Rebbe and the Shita of Rav Elazar Rav Shimon. Says the Gemara, my Rebbe, umay Rav Elazar Rav Shimon. Who are these Shitais? Says the Gemara, the Tani we learned in a Brayso. Rabbi Aimer teaches Rabbi Adam Mirat Alar. This Rikas Adam is Mirat of Neatzmai. Showing Basar Nolid by Psol. And if at the time that the R is still attached to the Basar, there is a Psol, Bein Kaidim Zrika, Bein Lachar Zrika, whether it's before or after the Zrika, Harehu Ki Yaitse Bai, then the R has the same din as the meat, meaning it's not going to go to the Kahin. No, it's not just about the Zrikas Adam. Ukshuim Abasar Noiled by Pasol, Kaidim Zrika, Hareu Ki Yaitse Bai. But if it's Achar Zrika, Hertzu Basar Sha'achas, then you have Shitanu Va'iroi Lekayanim. And that's going to be the Machlekes Rebbe and Rav Elazar Rav Shimon. What is the critical point that matters up the carbon and thereby allows the R to go to the Kohanim? So asks the Gemara a classical kasha. Anytime we have a Machlekes and we think that there was a prior Machlekes with the same details, it's shver. Because why would a latter Amarayim argue about that which former Amarayim or Tanayim debated? Says the Gemara, Lema b'Rav Elazar Rav Yeshua kamifligi. Shall we suggest that this machlekes Rebbe and Rav Elazar Rav Shimon is really an older machlekes between Rav Eliezer and Rav Yeshua, as they learn Vasisa leisecha basar v'adam, says the Torah, should do the oila, the basar and the dam. Rav Yeshua Omer, it mean dam, mean basar, in dam. It's all about the dam. Says Rav Yeshua, it's all about the dam. Rav Eliezer Omer, dam avmishin basar, shenever dam zevachim shvaich. No, the dam by itself is not intrinsically tied to the basar, says Rav Eliezer. In case, so what does he do with the pasuk of Rabbi Yeshua? Matam lem resizo l'zecha basar v'adam. Loim lecha teaches you madam bizrika basar bizrika. Halamadata. So says the Gemara. So what do we see from here? Sharevach yesh bin kevesh lemizveach. That there is a space between the revach, between the kevesh and the mizveach, a detail that we've already spoken about. So after articulating this machlekes, it suggests the Gemara lema. Mandam Hertzug Rav Elazar, Mandam Hertzug Rav Yeshua. Says the Gemara, let's see, Rebbe holds like Rebbe Eliezer that the Havshata, it still could go and be brought on the Mizbeach, because he's going like Rebbe Eliezer, that all has to do with the Dam, even when there's no Basar to permit it. And Mandamar lo yortza. And according to Rav Shimon, it's going to be like Rav Yeshua. So says the Gemara, is this an older machlokes? Answers the Gemara, no. Aliva de Rav Eliezer kulam lo pligi. There's no machlokes. Everyone can hold up sensibly like Rav Eliezer that even though the basar is pasal, the zrika adam could matter up the ar, and the basar and the dam are not intrinsically connected. So then what's the machlokes? Ki pligi aliva de Rav Yeshua. Mandam lo hurtzik Rav Yeshua, mandam hurtzo. Arm lachad can come Rav Yeshua asam elabe basar. That's a din dafka by the basar. Telekap seida lekayanim aval ar. Tikap seida lekayanim. He's going to be moide. I feel Rav Yeshua moide. Even Rav Yeshua is going to admit. Says the Gemara, midi dehave adiavad. Frag the Gemara, 1 second. What's going on over here? Frag the Gemara. Rav Yeshua holds that it's like a din dividiavad. The Tanya learned in a rice or the Tanan nitma basar nifsal sheitz chutz leklayim. V'lazem Yezek Yishomer lo Yizra. Kumayid Rav Yeshua. Here it is. Shem zarga. If you do it, hurtza it's a maisa going to work. And we continue with the latter half of the Mishnah, which was the statement of Rav Chanina's Kana Kohanim that Miyamai, I never saw the R being brought out lebeis hasreifa. Says the Gemara in the first white line, I'm Rav Chanina's Kana Kohanim. Veloi, frak the Gemara, really? But Hare, Paraman Israfim, even Israfim, the mitzvahs of the Shimon Israfim. So he certainly saw Karbanos being fully burnt. Says the Gemara, no, l'mitzvasa l'kamri. We're not talking about a case which he went out to burn them l'mitzvasa. Frak the Gemara, Ari kodim havshev kodim zrika chalutz. Excuse me, kodim havshev kodim zrika. But this karbanos that became possible before the zrika, before the havshet, and you cannot bring this such a carbon because it's possible. So why did Rav Chanina say he never saw the hide being brought out to be burnt? Says the Gemara, Cholotz Kamrina, and he's talking about a separate, an R by itself. Then what does he say? How could Rav Chanina say that Lamaisa there was never a case that the R brought out? There certainly had to have been a case. Explains the Gemara, Rav Chanina ki Rabbi Sfirle. He was like Rabbi, not like Rabbi Yeshua, Shimon. By saying a second there, Tavila took one care of Rav Shimon. Moida Rabbi Sheinav Shekodim Zrika. Rabbi is a Moida. There's no Havshit before the Zrika. Frakti Gemara Vikinim says Treifa from Nemeayim. What about the case if they find the animal to eat Treifa in an internal organ? Kosavar says the Gemara Chanina holds. Nim says Treifa from Nemeayim Miratze. That's still gonna work. And take an ambi, I'll bring you a raya. Tikatani Rabbi Kiva midavar of lamanu shamavshes abachar v'nim said treifa she also a kanim ba'ira ishma mina that even though it's found to be a treifa lamaisa kanim still get benefit from the ar. Velamai kamashlan Rabbi Kiva kamashlan dafilu big vulan. The chiddush of Rabbi Kiva says the Gemara is that the ar of the bachar is not going to be possible if it's treifa even big vulan even outside of the Beis HaMikdash. It concludes part A of today's Shia. Ram Rav Chiba Rav Rav Yechon Alach Rav Yekiva. Ve'af Rav Yekiva lo yamer al kshetira mumcha v'lo yitira mumcha loy. But Rav Yekiva is only going to say that you could get the R if it was hetiru mumchan, that when it's found to have a mum, it has to have a mumcha who says whether it's a mum kavua, etc. Excuse me, and that is how we indeed paskin halacha lemaisa. We continue with the Mishnah on the bottom of Kuf Dalid Amid Aleph. Harim and Israfim, Musirim and Israf, Karbanais with unique characteristics that we've learned already. This is the power of the Kayin Mashiach. This is the power of the Sibur. This is the Sir of Zara. The power of Sir Yom Kippurim. Karbanais that particularly had one detail that they were burnt. Bachotz, they were burnt outside of Yerushalayim in the Makkah Hadesha and the Beis Hadesha, number one. Number two, the fact that the dam was sprinkled inside. We know particularly on Yom Kippur, we know of the Zrikas Adam inside, etc. So these karbanos, bisman shein nisrafim k'mitzvasan, if they're burnt appropriately, nisrafim b'beis hadash, and that's why they have to be burnt. And what happens, the unique Xeris HaKasav, that the Kohanim that are involved in this Reifa are Tamei, Umetama Bigadim, and their total clothing becomes Tamei. But, V'meina Nisrafim, K'mitzvasim, they're not burnt appropriately. Then, Nisrafim B'beis HaBira, they're burnt in the Beis HaBira, in the Bira. V'einan Mitama Bigadim, and it's not Mitame Bigadim. What it means in the Bira, Rashi over here on the last line spells out Pa'amim, Pa'azara, sometimes the Azara, Pa'marabayis, Ka'amrina B'Gemara, as the Gemara will explain. And then the Chiddush is that it's not going to be Mitame B'Gadim. We turn over to Kaftalim and Beis and continues the Mishnah. They would carry this carbon, the Parman Nisrafim, this year Nisrafim, they would carry it b'maitais, with poles. Ois and maitais, those poles, yatsu, went out. Harishainim, Hayisayim l'say b'maitais. Yaitsu, harishainim chutz l'chaimais. Those who front when they went outside of the walls, hazara. Then, v'achrainim l'yatsu. Those in the back did not yet go out yet. So the Mishnah is telling us in real time that you have a pole with the animal, and as we're walking out, there's a guy in the front and the guy in the back. So when the guy in the front takes that step outside, as Rashi says, he becomes tamei, but those in the back do not become tamei. Yatsu, when those in the back have gone out, then Elu ve'elu achi yatsu. Yatsu elu v'tamei gadim. Tanakama. Rabbi Shimon Aimer. Eina me'tamen acheitze ya'ar beruban. Says Rabbi Shimon, no. They don't become tamei when they walk out, when they take that step over the threshold. But rather, achi yutzatz ha'ar beruban, until the fire catches most of the animal. Nitach habasar. Once the meat is decomposed, then it's too late, that it's not considered appropriate sreifa. Then the halacha is going to be that the one who burns it will not become tamei. So says the Gemara, let's begin with that which we had in the bottom of the Amid. The Mishnah said there are times that it's not burnt chutz, but rather it's burnt bebira. Says the Gemara, my bira, Rav There's a place in our Abayis called Bira. But Rish Lakish Amar, Kol Abayis Kula Karibia. No. Says Rish Lakish, the entire Beis HaMikdash, the entire Temple Mount and Beis HaMikdash is Karibira Shenemar. Velabira Asher Achi Noisi. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rav Ravua, Shleisha Beis HaDishanim. Hey, there were 3 places of ashes. Number 1, Beis HaDeshen Gadol Haya Bazara, a large piece of ash in Azara. The Shesham that there are Sarfim Psulei Kachei Kachim. They burnt the karbanos that were apostle. Ve'emurei Kachei Kalim, and the limbs of Kachei Kalim. Uparman Izrafim Izir and Izrafim. That what? Normally we just said they're supposed to go bachutz. So which ones are going to be burnt in Azara? She'ira ben Psal, Kaidim Zrika, if they became Pasal before the Zrika. That is location number 1. Location number 2, Beis Hashem Acher Haya Barabayis. There's a second location of ashes on Harabayis, outside the Azar, Shesam Zarfim, Barman, and Sam Sinra Zrafim. Without what? Shir ben Psal Acher Azrika. So again, there's 2 levels, 2 times of Psal that can happen in these karbanos. The spitz, the best is that they're supposed to be burnt bachotz outside of Yerushalayim. But at 2 different intervals, if they became possible, they either burnt ba'azara or they're burnt in the Beis HaDeshen on Harabayis. And says the Mishnah, K'mitzvasan, and when they are burnt, chutz l'shalosh machanois. That's the 3rd place, the place where they're burnt in the appropriate place, which is chutz Yerushalayim, outside of all 3 machanois. That is the first brisa dealing with the three locations of the burning of the ashes. Tani Levi comes along and he says slightly different. Shloisha Bisa the Shanain Bisa Deshin Gadolaya Bazara. Shabzar Psuli Kache Kashim Umri Kache Kalim Baram Nitzrafim Zir Nitzrafim. Shibem Sobein Kadim Zrika Bein La'acher Zrika. So Levi says whether the psola happened before or after the Zrika, they're burnt in the same place in the Azara. The second location, so when the second place of burning in Har HaBayis is only if the psola happened after they already left the Azara. And the third place is K'mitzvas and Chotz, the Shalish Machanai. So two different shitais of the three places of burning of the ashes. Says the Gemara, Bayir of Yirmiyah declares the Shaila. Lina Mahu Shetoyel Beparim and Rafim. What is the din about Lina? If the meat of the carbon of the Parim and Rafim stayed overnight, thereby parceling up the carbon, is that a level of paslos that requires it to be burnt or not? And the Gemara articulates what's the Shaila. When is the lina? Again, mahanya means it to help, but over here, mahanya means it's effective. That when is the lina effective to parcel up the carbon basar dvar achila? Only by a basar, by the meat that is consumed it's consumed either by people or by the mizbeach, meaning dvar achila, as we've learned many times, just means consumption. Two ways of consuming something, either us, Yidin, Yisraelim, Kohanim, or the mizbeach. Aval hani, but these karbanos, the parim and Shiva and Isravim, the lavini achila, and they don't go on the mizbeach. They're not burnt to the mizbeach, not eaten by people. Lie. So maybe lina will not be effective. That was the shaila of Rav Yirmiyah. Amar Rava, ha milsli by Abaye. They asked the Shalat Abaye, Pashat Alei Meha, and Abaye answered it from the following: Vishavim, says Abaye, that Rav Shimon and the Chachamim, the Brisa teaches, agree Shimchishe Ba'achilas Barim Ubisrei Fasan, that if a Kayin had a Machshaves Pigel during one of the Avaidais about the eating of the par or the burning of the par, Shaloi asa klom, that machshaves psol, that machshava, that thought of chutz mekayim chutz zmanoi, does not do anything. My love, so articulates Abaye the raya, but the machshava loy pasla, lina lami loy pasla. So Abaye's raya is, if machshava doesn't mess it up, then l'chayra lina will not as well. Says the Gemara, about 15 lines from the wide lines. First one line is Vidilma, but perhaps machshavo delay pasla, avolina pasla. Says the Gemara, maybe no. Maybe machshava doesn't pasol, but lina does. Who says the two are one and the same? So Tashema, we try to bring another raya. Paraman Isravim Zir and Isravim Ba'ilin Ba'em. There's a din of Me'ila Misheuk Tishu once they are kadosh. Mishchetu, if they're slaughtered, ochsheru lipasal b'tful. Once they're slaughtered, then they're susceptible to become pasal. If a tful yaim, someone who went to the mikvah and he's waiting for the sun to set, but they're still pasal, so tamei touches them. V'chusar kipurim, or one who is a v'chusar kipurim, as we've seen, a different level of tama. Ube'lina. So my love, linas basar. The Brisa says lina pasels. So says the Gemara, l'chayr is the classical lina of the flesh. Says Gemara, lo lina imurim. Ay, v'amiditani seifa kulan mailin b'han. All of them have a din of meila. Bebeis adeshin achitach basar. B'de seifa b'basar reishanami basar. Says Gemara, no raya midayir seifa basar reisha imurim. So attempt number 2 is deflected. A third attempt, 7 lines from the wide line. Tashimatani Levi. Shira ben Psolbi Tziasan. The Brisa said that there was Levi held that one of the locations of burning on the Har HaBayis is for when? Not if there's a psol before or after the Zrikas Adam, but if there's a psol in taking it out. My love, what is that psolina? Says Marloi, psol tama, upsol yitzia. Therefore, 3 attempts, no answers. And the Gemara moves on to new Shaila, which we'll pick it up from tomorrow. Bayi Rav Elazar b'siyata d'Ishmaya.